love crosses the line in prison. How does that happen? It happens more times often than you think. A female staff person crosses the line. It happens so quickly and in so many subtle ways that a lot of times they don't understand or even know what they've done to themselves. Welcome to the other side of the cell. Like, share, and subscribe, and we'll keep giving you these types of videos. The thought of someone who works in a prison that crosses the line is pretty simple. Inmates set the stage for these types of events to happen. They do it by secret conversations, subtle flattery, compliments, and by staff giving up personal information. The way they do that is inmates know the rules. Convicts know them better. Rookies and staff people coming into the prison system to work learn on the job. So you may have an inmate that's done 20 years. He already knows the game. A new person coming in doesn't. And a lot of times even seasoned staff and officers get caught up in the mix. And it's all about the stress of the job, financial hardships people may have, not feeling like that you're appreciated at your job, not feeling like that you are valued in your job. All those things play a factor. And as a staff person, you have to understand that you're being constantly watched. You're constantly being analyzed by inmates 24/7 because inmates have 24/7 to do just that. So if you show any signs of weakness, if you give the crack of the door being open, if you give them any indication that you are afraid or you are vulnerable, they will attack that and they will take advantage of it. It starts usually by some type of emotional situation, emotional conversation. It could start out as casual, could start out as, talking about an inmate comes to you for question, legitimate question, but he opens the door wanting you to say it's okay to talk about these things. A lot of times, guys, inmates come and they say, my girlfriend or my wife, I think she's cheating on me, something of that nature. And the officer will open the door to make that a personal conversation and say, yeah, I'm going through that. Like right now, my husband and I are not getting along because of A, B, and C. Once that door's open, then the game's on. The story I'm going to tell you about tonight is, this is an officer named, we'll call her Jenny. And Jenny worked in a maximum security institution. And Carlos is the inmate. And Carlos was a guy that was a smooth Italian, slick back hair, very well put together, muscular, probably about 6 foot, about 210. And Carlos was a player. And Carlos understood the game. And whenever he saw Jenny come in as a rookie officer, she had the look that he wanted. She was an attractive woman, long black hair, beautiful, but she had problems. So whenever he first saw her, in his mind, he targeted her. He hadn't had any interaction with her, didn't know anything about her, but in his mind, he knew that was the one he was going to target because he had a physical attraction to her. So during her process of orientation and everything, they were taking her around to different places, and Carlos was in lockup. And Carlos had been a great manipulator, had compromised many staff. That's why he was in lockdown, because he had 1920 compromising write-ups for that, and it was always a woman, never a man, because it's harder to compromise men a lot of times because men are just too. You're not going to be able to tell them how good looking they are or whatever. The bullshit and the game's got to be different. But Carlos, being a player that he was, saw vulnerabilities in women, and this woman, Jenny, he saw that she seemed to have some insecurities when he talked to her. So Carlos understood that the way you play the game is you got to just do some fishing. So, for whatever reason, they had allowed this new officer, Jenny, to work her way into where she was working on the lockdown unit. They didn't let her go out on the floor, but she was in the control room. And Carlos had months to study this. And somehow, during the process of him being down there, he heard, because he ear hustled a lot out the cell doors and during chow, that she was in the control room working a lot. And he heard that from one of the other janitors that was working that pod. So Carlos's idea was he's doing a lot of time in SEG, so he figured if I behave and I get in good with the captains and the lieutenants and the sergeants, maybe I can get a job as a janitor. And if I get a job as a janitor, I can get close to Jenny and I get in proximity of her. So that's what he did. He worked his way, behaved himself, no write ups, volunteered to clean, volunteered to do whatever he needed to do in order to make this happen. And this took months because compromises never happen overnight. They are a grooming process. So first he grooms the officers to like him. Then after he gets to where he wants to go, then he has the opportunity to shoot a shot. And that's what he did. So during this process, it took him about 6 months to get to the status of a pod janitor in the SEG unit. So once he gets to that level, he figures out the day she works, when she works, and things like that. So during the course of this whole scenario, he figures out a way to manipulate himself into the control room to help take the trash out, because part of the janitor's job was to mop, sweep, and take the trash out under supervision. So there was a lapse in security because of just laziness, because that happens. People work 16 hours, 12 hours, 16 hours a day, they get lazy. In this case, the security aspect of it become lazy. And what they started doing with the janitors were, when they get them out of SEG and they take them around to do their duties, they would take the inmate to the control room area to clean and let him in there with the officer. And that officer that's working the control room is also supervising the janitor doing cleaning, which is definitely a big no. That should never happen. But that's what happened. So Carlos, in his infinite wisdom, decided, now that I'm close to her, I'm going to start just making small talk. So the first interaction he had with her was like, I'm doing a lot of time. I miss my mom, and I don't have nobody. I'm so lonely. Blah blah. So Jenny, being having some empathy for him, starts talking about how she understood what it was like to be lonely and all these things. And he said, "Well, can I ask you a question? Not to get in your business, but aren't you married?" And she said, yeah, I'm married, but my husband and I don't have any type of physical relationship. Wrong answer, wrong answer, wrong answer. You don't say that. So once she said that to him, he knew in the back of his brain, I got her. She's vulnerable. Then she goes on to tell him that her and her husband have not had sex in a couple years. They don't even sleep in the same bed. He has medical issues. He's an alcoholic. Can't get an erection. All these things that she should never, ever, ever, ever tell an inmate, but she did. So he grooms her for several weeks, um, and gets her to tell him a whole bunch of stories about her life, her kids. She had a dog. He knew all this information about her, and he, would tell her, if I had you, I would treat you like a queen. I would make love to you every night. I would hold you. I would give you all the things that he's not giving you. So they developed a relationship verbally, which crossed the line in many elements because not only did it cross the line, she just gave him too much information and told him too many things. So the last part of it was he decided that he wanted to take it over the edge. So there's a day he's down there cleaning, and he's sweeping in the control room, and she's there. She's facing it, looking out at the day room area, the pod area, and she's just looking, and he's in there doing his thing, and he's like, "Hey Jenny, can I ask you a question?" And she says, "Sure, you can ask me anything. You can trust me." And he's like, "Can I say this without getting in trouble? Can I say this without fear of getting locked up?" She said, "You can say anything." And he says, "Are you sure about that? Please, because this has been on my mind. I can't take it no more." And she says, "Please, please tell me." And he's like, "Are you sure? Because this could get us both in big, big trouble." And she says, "You can tell me anything." And he turns around and he looks at her and he says, "I just want to know what it would be like to be inside you." And at that moment, she lost all train of thought of her job, her training, and she fell in love. And the reason we know that is just because of the interviews after she lost it all. Because ultimately, these types of relationships always end up where a person gets fired, they get caught having sex, and it all unravels. In this case, it took a while for that to happen, but it did happen. So after he told her that, she fell in love with him, and then her behavior changed. Like I said, she was a pretty woman, long black hair, probably 5'8", 5'7", 5'8", 120 pounds, if that. Very attractive. And he played on that and played on that. And then there wasn't cameras in the control room at that time, so he walked over to her and grabbed her and pulled her close and kissed her. And after that, it was over for her. She decided she wanted a divorce. She decided that she could no longer live the life she was living and she wanted to be with him. So instead of them getting caught, she goes to her supervisor, which was one of the captains, and tells him that she's going to quit. And Nobody could figure out why. She said it's just too much stress. There's too much um, things going on. I can't take this. I can't do this no more. So everybody is trying to figure out why, because everything seemed to be going well, and everything seemed to be she was getting along, doing a good job. In the end, Carlos, being the dumb, you know, overconfident egomaniac that he was, started running his mouth. And whenever you're on a SEG unit, most of the guys do a lot of talking whenever they take what we call the bean holes down to feed, which is basically the slots where you put the food trays in. So during that time, Carlos, being this cocky, arrogant person he was, started whispering and talking about how he was banging a correctional officer. Well, inmates are inmates, and the code is not to tell. But guess what? Somebody told on him because they were pissed because he was getting something they weren't. So they dropped a kite on him. Investigators found out. Investigators investigated, got enough information from phone call recordings, and searched inmates' possessions and found love letters, things like that. Even though he didn't put her name on it, he described things in detail to where when they took her up to the investigator's office, because one day she came in, they took her straight up to the investigator's office, didn't let her allow her to enter the facility. Um, and under the pressure of the interrogation, she admitted to um, having feelings for him and crossing the line. And fortunately for her, she didn't go all the way, but she did allow him to touch her and put his hands down her pants and things like that. They didn't actually have physical sex like you would imagine. So she ended up losing her job. The inmate had to be moved to a different facility, a higher level facility, um, and she lost everything. Her husband divorced her. Obviously, she lost her job, which was a good paying state job with state benefits and all that, you know, and she lost it all because she tried to have some forbidden fruit. And all the years that I was in corrections, I never could be able to figure out why women become so vulnerable and cross the line and allow these guys to bullshit them and lie to them and tell them all these fantasies and they fall for it. But they do. If you've ever been incarcerated, if you ever worked in a prison, drop some comments down below and tell us your experience and tell us if you've ever seen that and, and how it starts. Though these are the things that I've seen. It's usually from low self esteem, it's from manipulation, a lot of times it's from financial strain because, inmates will pay you to do anything. This particular case, it was just a case of forbidden love, the forbidden fruit syndrome is what I call it. And Jenny ended up losing everything over it all, getting escorted out. And the only way that she didn't get prosecuted is she voluntarily resigned and could never get another state job and could never come back on the property again. Carlos went off to do his time at a higher level facility, and I think his parole date was like 2040, so he's still waiting to see the parole board. And Jenny's fate is unknown at this time. Not sure where she went, what she did, but I do know that she lost her job, her house, and her marriage. Was it worth it? I don't know. You'll have to ask Jenny. I can tell you is make sure that you always, always stay on the other side.